Right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to what I'm calling the business model session. My name is John Watts. I'm going to be moderating this gloriously expert panel. Our theme today is one that I'm sure you're all eager to learn more about. We're going to be trying to unpick the nature of the battle for the living room, and in particular, we're going to try and carve out and provide some light into the current landscape for AVOD, TVOD, SVOD, and all the other types of VOD. How do you monetize those assets? What's the right mix of revenues that you're going to look to generate? How are you going to succeed in winning the battle for the living room, for the customer, for their spending? We have a fantastic panel. Their names are up there. Oh, they're gone. We've slid down, never mind. Not to worry, they're going to introduce themselves. So, without any further ado, I'm going to quickly just move straight down the panel, get them to tell us who they are, what they do, what their business model is, and then just a few thoughts on the current monetization landscape as they see them. Very briefly, before I do that, I was heckled last time for not introducing myself. My name is John Watts. I'm the managing partner at consulting business MTM. We specialize in business models, revenues, all this kind of stuff. So hopefully we'll be able to interrogate what our audience and panel are telling us. Right, let's jump straight in. Andrea, tell us who you are.
Sure. Hi, Andrea Clarke-Hall. I lead business development. Sounds like it's working. Should I lift? All right, I am going to lift it. I'll be very awkward, but okay.
Can everyone hear all right?
Andrea Clarke-Hall. I lead business development for Tubi. We are the
I think that's called take two.
Understood.
I do apologize. All right, I'm going to start again. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome yet again to the business model session. My name is John Watts. I'm going to be your moderator for this session. Our plan for today is to basically unpick what's really happening with business models in the OTT and streaming services space. We've got four very diverse panelists here who will cast some light on what's taking place, tell us a bit about their own experiences, and hopefully tell us a bit about how you can make money from your services in the 2020s. We will definitely allow some time for questions and heckles at the end, so please store them up, and we'll make sure we have a couple of minutes for you to pepper the panel with really awkward questions that hopefully will help solve some of your quandaries. To get the ball rolling, I'm going to work my way down the panel. I'm going to ask each of these lovely panelists just to tell us who they are, what they do, how they make money, and their view on the current landscape. What's going on? Where is the cash? Let's start straight away with Andrea.
Hi, I am Andrea Clarke-Hall, and I lead business development for Tubi. For those of you not familiar with Tubi, we are the largest of the AVOD services, ad-supported video on demand. We're completely free to viewers. We monetize with branded commercials, just like you are familiar with on linear television. And we've been growing exponentially. It's a really exciting time to be in the AVOD market. We are very much a volume play. We currently have over 15,000 movies and television shows in our library, from pretty much all of the leading studios except for Disney at this point. Work very closely with Lionsgate and MGM, who are investors in our service, NBC Universal, A&E Networks, AMC Networks, among many others. And we are extremely bullish, as you can imagine, on AVOD. We're firmly of the belief that viewers want to watch all of this library content, less and less of which is appearing on Netflix and Amazon. And they are willing to watch commercials so long as the ad experience is a good one, is mindful of their time, is not too repetitive, and is really targeted and tailored to them.
And briefly, lots of companies are very excited at the moment about freemium models, about combining AVOD and SVOD. You're not of that view, is that right?
That's correct. Our CEO, Farhad Masudi, has been very vocal that we are exclusively free, and our plan is to remain exclusively free for a number of reasons. There is tremendous opportunity in the ad-supported market, right? We've heard time and time again, linear ratings on television are declining, but advertisers still have massive brand budgets, and they want a place to put these dollars in a really premium, brand safe environment. And so we are leaning in very heavy to that. We understand that AVOD is all about scale.
Right.
So we are growing aggressively, wanting to get as many eyeballs as we can. And we also don't want to confuse the marketing message, right? It's very difficult to effectively have a freemium model.
So this is about simplicity and clarity and lots of opportunity out there.
Exactly.
Okay, Richard.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Richard Shirley, and I'm very proud to be a member of the distribution team at A&E Networks. I'm sure most of you know A&E represents some of the greatest brands and shows in cable television, including A&E Network, History Channel, and Lifetime. As far as our business model is concerned, it's basically all of the above acronyms, AVOD, SVOD, and everything in between. However, the lion's share of our revenue base comes from the work we do in the pay TV ecosystem, which leverages revenues in the licensing arena, as far as the fees we take from affiliates, as well as ad sales and monetizing advertisements on our services. That being said, we're very cognizant of the fact that there is a battle taking place in the living room of the consumer, and A&E's guiding principle in all of this, our North Star, if you will, is consumer behavior and where consumers are going. Now, I won't say there's been a tectonic shift, at least not today, where we're seeing our business model turn on its head completely, but we realize that to leverage our core capabilities as great storytellers, we have to be in a position where we can tell our stories regardless of where the viewer is going. So we're very bullish on the AVOD space and the SVOD space, working with Andrea and others in the market, and I'm excited to discuss today together with members of the panel where we all think that's going.
And Richard, can I just ask you, are there trade-offs in mixing these different business models across your portfolio?
Sure. I think you can't ignore the fact that when you do something in Arena A, it's going to have an impact in Arena B. But I also believe that A&E acting on its own isn't going to be able to influence the shift for the entire market. So what's really important for us is to follow where the market as a whole is going very closely and make sure that we can take part.
Okay. I'm delighted to welcome back now a veteran of this panel. We did the same session in Vegas earlier this year. Cameron.
Thanks, John. Cameron Douglas. I'm representing Fandango today. Fandango is a portfolio of brands that service over 60 million monthly users. That includes Fandango, Fandango Now, Fandango Movie Clips, Rotten Tomatoes, and a few other brands as well. About 72% of US moviegoers visit a Fandango brand every weekend when they choose what they want to go see, whether it's a movie or TV, because Rotten Tomatoes also supports the TV space. We're talking today about Fandango Now, which is our home entertainment brand. It is on about 200 million devices. We have just under 100,000 pieces of content, and it's the first run content straight out of theaters and straight off of TV. And it is available on all the living room devices you can imagine, as well as things like this, which is, as Parrot Analytics would say, is a television at this point. So when we talk about battle for the living room, I think that counts as battle for the living room, or you might actually even say it's battle for the bedroom or battle for any other room. Oh, that sounds dirty. I didn't mean to say that. You knew what I meant. And from a monetization standpoint, it probably is logical to understand why Fandango would be interested in the first run business. So movies that are in theaters that you may or may not have seen or want to enjoy again, Fandango now has available at the ready in that first available window. The other thing to mention is that this is TVOD, which is transactional VOD. You buy or rent movies and TV shows. The difference between TVOD and the other VODs is that it really is more of an e-commerce business. You are buying merchandise essentially, albeit digitally, and then you profit from the selling or renting of that title individually. The model isn't much more sophisticated than that, so it actually operates more like a digital e-commerce business.
Now, I'm right in saying, I think, that like Andrea, you're very committed to one particular revenue stream, the transactional revenue stream. Why have you not tried combining it with other revenue models like SVOD or AVOD?
Yeah, and a lot of our competitors right now, and I think we'll get into this in the conversation, a lot of our competitors are getting into hybrid models. Most of them have some sort of hybrid. The transactional really is the one that makes the most sense for Fandango because of the availability. It's really a content windowing strategy that the studios purport. So the example we've been using a lot lately is Lion King. It could be any movie. Hobbs and Shaw just came out yesterday on our service, and it was in theaters only a couple of months ago. So that's the most logical business model for us. Obviously, to have a library of 100,000 titles means that there are people enjoying other content every day. When I look at our top 20, for example, in a given week, there's about that actually accounts for about 42% of our business that week. That means that 100 minus 42. 58% of the content is the rest of that long tail content that is on our service.
So it's a hits window-driven business, basically.
Definitely, but it's actually important to have the rest of that portfolio as well.
Okay, now last but not least, one of my favorite panelists in the world, Matt. You've seen almost everything at least several times. Tell us about your experience with business models then. Where are your clients taking you? Tell us about what you do at Comcast.
So at Comcast Technology Solutions, we provide the tools and technology, all the underpinnings, plumbing, if you will, of many of the video services that some of you in the audience may use. And we're leveraging the tools and technologies that Comcast has to provide that living room experience in a traditional cable model to clients of ours who need a lineup of live channels, for example, or very powerful tools to manipulate the video content, the metadata, to drive their video service. They may not want to build the app, so we can provide those underpinnings and really help them have a world-class app. So fundamentally, that's what we do. You asked about trends. What was?
When clients are coming to you wanting to launch OTT offerings, streaming services, and so on, are you seeing any particular momentum towards certain types of business model? Where's the action at the moment?
Great question. And maybe this will get us into another one. So we're consulted from time to time by some clients who say, what's the right mix? How do I convert the AVOD subscriber to an SVOD subscriber? What's that right window? And it takes some educated thinking and some battle scars, if you will. Think about it. If I'll use a show like Breaking Bad, for example. If you offer a free to subscription trial and it's a 30-day window and you've got a 19-year-old kid, guess what? They're going to burn through every episode of that before you get $1. And it's not really that hard to figure out, but you do have to think about your library of content, what you have in the store, what that trial period is. And we have some data to help share with our customers and recommend to them. Ultimately, it's their decision. But that's a trend that we're seeing a lot these days is what's the right mix? And that's not to say having a standalone AVOD service is not valuable, because they certainly are. But that's one model today that we're being asked a lot about.
When I think of it, I often think that there are kind of two pillars that you have to hang your strategy off. If you're going SVOD, you need something shiny, new, and exclusive. Otherwise, you're probably going to struggle. If you're going AVOD, it's hard to do it unless you have real scale. I mean, Richard, you're obviously looking at both of these models. Does that echo true to you?
Yeah, well, not necessarily. So on the SVOD side, A&E actually has two of its own owned and operated SVOD platforms, one of which is called Lifetime Movie Club, collection of Lifetime movies, obviously. The other is History Vault, which is a collection of older library history content. So in either case, we're certainly not featuring, I don't want to say top shelf, it's all premium quality content, but it's not recently telecast content. We're delving deep into the vaults to bring some of these offerings to market. And we're seeing quite a bit of success with those models. On the AVOD side, I would say similarly, we're playing with primarily the vast library of content that we have. But I would say in both cases, it's sort of a price skimming strategy, if you will, right? in terms of what I said before about being where the consumer goes, some folks, are interested for History Vault, for example. If you're into World War II and history documentaries, that is the premier destination to go to find that kind of content. And we charge $4.99 for it. Folks stick with that product and enjoy it. On the other hand, what Andrea is doing over at Tubi is inviting a lot of people who aren't necessarily tethered to a subscription model, but they want the convenience, they want the free arena to which they can go to enjoy content, and we realize that we have to play in that space as well. So with this skimming strategy, we're able to capture the attention of both kinds of audiences, and they both work in that regard.
Yeah, I was going to say, so we work very closely with the A&E team. They're wonderful partners of ours. We've worked together for about 2.5 years now. And what's really interesting is the economics are very rapidly evolving in that as companies like A&E are learning that they can make more and more money in an AVOD window, it's starting to disrupt all of these traditional windowing strategies. Certainly the TVOD market as well. We've been working with more and more of, not quite, not the studio, the large studios yet, but certainly the mid-tier studios to get closer, sooner and sooner windows and very much encroaching on that kind of first-run TVOD business as content, as content owners understand the AVOD, financial opportunity.
And briefly, obviously, because the thing about AVOD is you need a certain level of scale. I mean, true in SVOD as well, but AVOD, very much all you're relying upon is your audience. Presumably the same thing that encourages everyone into the market makes it harder and harder to scale. Is this an overly crowded environment?
I would not want to be in the business of asking for share of wallet right now, right? It's an incredibly competitive time to be asking viewers for another $5 a month, right? I mean, people have talked about that ad nauseum. But in terms of free, it's a wonderful time to come in. And I think the research has been clear. People will subscribe to 2, if not 3 SVOD services, right? You hear that all the time. But they still are willing to watch more services. They just don't want to pay for them.
Matt, does that echo what you're seeing? So there's an SVOD window which is starting to close, and we're going to see more folks on AVOD in the 2020s. Would you agree with that?
I think that's partially true, but I also live in a world where I know a lot of people who like to hit skip ad. So the real impact to the ad buyer is comes into question. So I'm not sure I want to live in a world of absolutes.
Right. So it's going to be a messy, complicated picture.
I don't see any trends really forming. I mean, you could make the argument that we may not be that far away from being asked to give up data in exchange for watching this content. People don't want to watch ads; they click skip ads. So, are you willing to give them, just say accept to a EULA? Here's my demographic information. Here's my phone number. Do what you want with it, because you could argue that that's happening on some other platforms that are not video specific.
Okay, let's start deep diving into some of the individual revenue models before we sort of bring it back and go back to the big picture and talk a bit about the next 5 years. SVOD. So I guess we're in that sort of strange time in the market when the big media conglomerates are racing to launch their Netflix wannabe services, with several of them due out the doors in the next kind of 6 months. How would you describe that window? I mean, Rich, when you look at it, are we going to see many of these services, or actually is this a 3 or 4 services only and then the game is done?
Clearly, there's a trend toward consolidating huge pools of content and huge libraries. And I think when you're playing at that level, the market is, to your point earlier, I think the market is getting fairly crowded. But that's not to say there won't be room for that long tail. And I put our services, LMC, Lifetime Movie Club, as well as History Vault, in that long tail side of the equation. And I think the key there is when you have content that meets the needs of a particular segment, and you're able to super serve, the needs of, in our case, the history buff or the folks who really have a cult passion for Lifetime movies. You're pretty well insulated from some of those larger shifts that are taking place in the market.
that top end of the market, in the next 3 years, that window's kind of closed, isn't it?
Well, that again, I don't speak in absolute terms. I think it's getting very, very competitive. We'll see what happens with Netflix's announcements later today.
I think there's both. So people in my organization heard me say this in a webinar just this week. There's research that says the behemoths are able to cut through the noise. So your Primes, your Netflix, your Disney Plus will resonate, and everyone in the room will know that service is there. But if you like niche content, if you like World War II content, if you like shows about people who eat hot wings and cry and their nose runs, you'll go and find that, right? So the challenge for some of these specialty services is cutting through the noise and finding that audience. But if you watch A&E on your television at home and you're on the go and you want to consume that content elsewhere, you're going to know how to do it. So I don't think it's a world of absolutes where the behemoths live and everyone else starves of oxygen. I think you're going to have a little bit of both.
Right. Isn't it really just the same thing, right? And it's sucking all of the press out of the room, right? All the coverage is on these big SVOD services, right. Disney, NBC, Warner, et cetera. But it's really the same thing that an A&E is doing. It's just at a different scale because they have access to a larger assortment of content or a different assortment of content. But it's essentially the same thing. You could argue that Lifetime Movie Club is a niche, but it's just different. And yes, they absolutely can coexist. It seems like one of the themes we're probably going to come up with here is that there are no absolutes. And just back to your comment earlier about the SVOD and that you need that shiny new thing. In this case, those services are the shiny new thing. They're coming, I guess Apple as well, they're coming with original content. That's the old HBO model, essentially, that Netflix has kind of developed into something even more mature than HBO has. But in the case of a Lifetime or History, that you don't necessarily need original content for it, but you need to serve that niche. It's essentially the same thing.
Well, and some of these programmers, John, this is a passion project for me, are not too far away from reaching into those libraries of content to bring things back out that some of us in the audience may know, but others do not. And I'll give you an example. Miami Vice, right? Half of the room has probably heard of this show, but my two kids have not. But you never know what's going to catch on and be viral and everyone's going to talk about. And I'm not going to put on parachute pants or anything, but you're going to see kids at Goodwill buying the white linen jacket again. You never know. But it doesn't cost, the cost of pulling that out of the library for NBCU, putting it into a service, supporting it with an ad model, an AVOD sort of a model, cost them orders of magnitude less than it did even 3 years ago. So I think you're going to see specialty channels that spin up. You're going to have a Miami Vice channel, a Knight Rider channel, a Game of Thrones channel. And yes, we're used to going now and clicking, next episode and doing it at your own pace. But I think these new channels are going to represent new ways of bringing the content out and new ways to monetize the content.
Almost micro subscriptions.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the themes that really works for me when I try to think about paradigms for our industry is that in many ways the content publishers, I don't want to say we're getting crushed, but we're under a lot of pressure from the weight of our own libraries, so to speak, right? What you're talking about before, when you pull Miami Vice out of the vault, if somebody hasn't seen it, guess what? It might be good enough for that person, and it acts as a reasonable substitute for things that are being recently telecast as well. So not only are the publishers now competing with everybody else out there in the space, they're also competing with those vast vaults of content that consumers are going to latch onto and might not necessarily represent as lucrative a profile as the things that we're publishing on our air yesterday.
I think the error that some of the SVOD channels make that may not be around anymore is that they didn't have enough access to enough content to cycle through stuff. So what happened is they launched a service, and this is different than the micro subscription idea because I think that's actually an interesting thought. But you have some niche, anime, hot dog eating, whatever it was, and you have 400 hours of content. Someone burns through it because they are a fan, and then there's nothing left. So you actually do need a deep enough library to bring things on that are fresh and new.
I think what's interesting about that library content is it can play two slightly different roles. It can be a fantastic retention tool in a subscription service. So something like Miami Vice clearly has a role in potentially in lots of different SVOD services. It's probably not the thing that pulls people in the first place and makes them subscribe.
Sure.
But it's sure as hell keep them there.
Yep.
But it can also drive an AVOD service.
Yes. And we've seen, we have a lot of examples where there's actually a lot of content that lives on both services, right? So it's, it's available to a user who is willing to watch ads. And then for that really for the lifetime super fan who wants to go deep and doesn't want to watch ads, then the Lifetime movie channel serves a very valued purpose. And so I think we're finding more and more that there actually is a lot of content that's living across multiple
Well, let's not forget, John, that this is a tool that even current programming could be used and kind of dropped into. So, I'll pick on HGTV, right? It's a brand my wife loves. So you could have an entire Monday of Love It or List It. Tuesday is Beachfront Bargain Hunt. Wednesday is
I was going to say, all the names of these shows. So maybe it's not just your wife.
some of them. Well, I do like the
Flip it or flop it.
I like the Caribbean, yeah. But so it's counter programming, but it's newer. It's some of their content that does draw people in, presented in a different way to where they can binge it, with some control. You see them do these marathons, run these marathons on the broadcast channel on the weekend. Now it's there for you during the week too.
And I'm guessing, having spoken to you earlier, that in that subscription space, you see lots of opportunity for very different types of business model in the next 5 years. Temporary services, season passes. There's lots of different ways of monetizing rather than just a fixed recurring subscription if we want people to pay. Is that right?
Sure. I mentioned HBO earlier. I mean, if you think about the broadcast side of that, they've gotten very clever about us who like certain shows turning on and off that service. There's always something to catch you, right? You like Game of Thrones, oh, hey, here's Succession, and you're like, wow, that's pretty good too. And so now with these different models where you could throw a virtual channel up, or you could create a Game of Thrones channel or a Succession channel, it's there all the time. It's there for you to still, find some immediacy in. And then, like I said, you could pull some content out of the library that hasn't been on there in years, like Sopranos or I'm trying to think of the Western.
Sex and the City.
Sex and the City, great example, Deadwood. And it's new again, right? And you have to think of I know this isn't a focus of the panel, but you have to think of the viral nature of social media, right? Because someone sees it, let me baseline that. We're all accustomed to recommendations from our friends and colleagues. Hey, what'd you watch last night? Oh, I watched Better Call Saul. Oh, I never checked that out. Okay. Social amplifies that. So if someone sees this crazy guy with this stubble beard and these Ray-Bans glasses and a white linen jacket, check this outfit out. This is a cop show. It's crazy. And then, it multiplies.
Let's turn and talk about the AVOD space a little bit. So first of all, let's get some principles on the table. What does it really take to succeed with an AVOD service today? What's the kind of minimum threshold, say, in terms of user numbers, in terms of content hours, these sorts of things?
Yeah, it is, like anything, it is always a lot harder than it looks, right? A lot of people think that they can, we can get into the business. It takes a number of things. Technology. Tubi is first and foremost a Silicon Valley tech company. We have a small to mid-sized army of amazing engineers who make the magic happen, because you can have the best content in the world, but if you see buffering or if your ads do not play right, you are going to lose a viewer. So technology for us is paramount. It is content volume. The goal is to be, where can I, that movie, I've wanted to see it for so long, where can I find it? I know I can find it on Tubi. Right?
How many hours have you got? How many titles?
So right now we have, we're probably going to announce a larger number soon. The most recently announced number was 15,000.
Right.
And that's movies and individual TV series, so not seasons or episodes. We've well over, don't quote me, certainly over 40,000 videos at this point. So you can absolutely know, gosh, I haven't seen Dirty Dancing. Where can I find it? You can find it on TV.
But you're describing a market in a sense in which the barriers to entry are quite high, in my sense. Richard, would you
I would agree. Yeah. Well, it's the technology, as Andrea described. It's not easy, and we have experience building out on the SVOD side, LMC and Vault, but with AVOD, I imagine it's much more complicated than that. You're dealing with more people coming through the door. But then beyond the technology and infrastructure issues, I think particularly in the AVOD space, scale is going to be of critical importance. I think in the advertising market, there's a continuum of advertising opportunities. On the left-hand side, the traditional side, well, I want to work with a brand and leverage the affinity with that brand to reach a particular group of consumers that I know like a show. On the other side of the spectrum is I don't care what they're watching, but if I know it's a 18 to 49-year-old male who's most likely to buy an SUV in the next 2 months, so it's that hyper-targeting that you get into. The thing is, when you move along that spectrum, it becomes harder. The science of finding that viewer becomes harder, and you solve a lot of issues when you have scale, right? You're able to apply data and business intelligence across millions and millions of viewers. That's when it becomes really interesting to advertisers. The deal with advertising is you want to make it as friction-free a process for your advertising partner and bring as much transparency as you can to the table. So you got to be big in the AVOD business.
Absolutely agree. AVOD is about scale, which is why the barriers to entry are quite high, right? Tubi, again, recently went out in June announcing we have now over 20 million monthly active users. Those are actual video viewers, right? We have been in the business for over 5 years now. I have been here for a long time and was not received as well as I am now, right? It takes a long time to build up this type of service.
Cameron, let's just quickly talk about the transactional piece as well. I know your sense is that the transactional market is becoming pretty concentrated. There's a kind of fat head and then not much else.
Yeah, I've kind of said before that the field is essentially set. I think there'll be new entrants from time to time. A couple of people will exit, but I don't believe that, unlike subscription, where there's three or four new big ones coming in and 30 or 40 mid-sized ones and 400 niche ones, like that's happening again. That's where all the concentration is of new products, new brands out there. But I don't expect to wake up tomorrow in a fairly commoditized business, which is transactional, and see 40 new entrants. We're all, because of the way licensing works with the studios, it's essentially all the same content. But I would say that part of that is barriers to entry, minimum guarantees for the studios to actually license that premium content to you in the first place, the tech stack itself, the carriage to get on all the devices that just takes a while from a business development standpoint to get on. But I think I think it requires scale just like AVOD. I'm not sure if SVOD necessarily does. I think that there's I've spoken to a few people that run reasonably small. And small is not a damning word in the sense. It's just relatively few customers compared to some of the bigger brands like a Netflix, obviously. So at a scale of 1/100th of those, and they actually can do pretty well.
I mean, it's all about your content costs at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's essentially the content cost.
If you can find a critical mass of content relatively cheaply that a certain audience really wants, you can launch a service and potentially make money.
And that you have the marketing skill to find those consumers. And then for transactional, you're sort of we're competing for the $5 like everybody else, but in a very different way. You're not committing to the $5, so you're sort of an overcurrent, undercurrent, whatever the right way to say is, over all of the other services that you may choose, whether it's traditional on VPD, whether it's OTT, that occasionally you're just going to want to see Toy Story 4. And you're willing to pay the $6 or the $20 to own it, or in our case for 4K, that allows you to have Toy Story 4 at that moment on your terms.
Matt, so the fact that we have so many different types of service launching and that the market is to some extent starting to mature a bit, suggests that the kind of technology and operation environment for running OTT services is kind of mature. I mean, if it was really hard to do, we wouldn't have 200 plus services operating in the US. Is it relatively straightforward today if you have a content library to get an SVOD or AVOD service out there?
Yeah, I think so. I think the technology's matured. There's been a lot of innovation in the last handful of years, and now it gets to the intelligence of delivering that content to the viewer. I've got to be careful about this because, talking about data is very sensitive, but understanding behaviors, understanding why someone watched that particular show or that episode, and maybe being predictive about where they might go, right? So using that data and using things like machine learning, not AI. AI is Tom Cruise doing this. But using machine learning and crunching the data so that you derive real intelligence out of user behavior and patterns, and then using that to make your service more sticky.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, we have invested very heavily in our machine learning technology. It is a big priority, certainly in the AVOD space. In the AVOD space, you have a matter of seconds to get someone to find what they want to watch. And if they don't, you don't make money from them, right? And so it's more important than ever to be able to serve the right content to the right viewers, which I actually think means it's more important than ever to have your technology in-house, to build things in-house so you can.
I think Matt might disagree.
One amendment. No. I just wanted to go back and add a caveat to my statement about technology has matured. It has, and the tools and technologies are there. You shouldn't be afraid of building a service on top of the backs of any of these, companies and their solutions. But my pet peeve is be careful about talking about future tech in such present terms. I get bothered today when people talk about 8K. When are we going to have 8K? Have you thought about how you shoot it and edit it and render it? I mean, that's really hard. I mean, we're delivering 4K titles today. We're able to do that. But the incremental step from HD to 4K was not a light lift for the industry. And if you think about anyone in your network or even in your neighborhood, do they own an 8K TV? If you know someone, you're rare. So just be careful before we start getting that cart in front of the horse.
I just want to ask Richard, because you're the odd one out on this panel in the sense that you are a so-called traditional or incumbent broadcaster, and you've obviously built the capability to roll out a portfolio of streaming services using different business models. Can you just give us some insights into how complex that was, or easy? Has that been a journey?
As far as technology and infrastructure goes?
Yeah.
It was really easy, right?
It was really straightforward.
Walk in the park.
Piece of cake.
So I tend to have a kind of a bifurcated perspective on this. For things that we do in-house, so the owned and operated platforms, whether they be our SVOD services, we have a variety of TV Everywhere apps, which allow customers to access a robust library of content, provided they provide their paid TV credentials. So there are a lot of things we, either on our own or together with trusted technology partners, are able to build that. And I think by now it's a relatively straightforward process. Where I see there being a lot more complexity is around what I call the off-domain set of businesses. So those are the partnerships, for instance, in the paid TV community, where we're sending content to Comcast or AT&T or others. Those are relationships where we provide content to players in the premium SVOD space, whether it be Netflix or Amazon. And in fact, if you look at the SVOD offerings that we have for LMC and Vault, we actually have replications of those on platforms like Roku and Amazon. The translation can be wildly complicated, not just in terms of, do I have the right file format to give a partner, but also in terms of, well, if I have a category of shows on History Vault that's represented in this way, when I turn around and try to put it on Roku's platform, it might be a completely different representation. So working through the process of normalizing and reconciling is actually very labor intensive. My team is actually responsible for this work at A&E, so I can speak to it firsthand. But that's just a small representation of the enormous amount of complexities there are.
So we're running perilously short of time. Let's just try and pull everything together then and talk a little bit about the title of our session, The Battle for the Living Room. What, if you put this all together, is the battle for the living room? What's your sense of who you're competing with from an AVOD, TVOD, SVOD space?
I mean, I think it's a battle for people's time generally, right? It's not, as you mentioned, it's not the living room. It's all of the various means that are diverting our free time. So we take, we look at the competitive landscape quite broadly beyond the traditional streaming services to capture a larger share of our viewers' free time.
Does the battle for the living room mean anything for you? Do you think about it?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, the good news for consumers is all those people that are doing battle in the living room, they're not going anywhere. They're going to stay. There will be some share shifting going on, and some will win, some will lose, but they're around to stay, and that's going to benefit the consumer. We want to be on all of those platforms. The other thing, I know we don't have much time, but from a competitive standpoint, we don't necessarily look to other publishers of content. They're the platforms themselves. I mean, you look at guys like Roku, they're a very valuable partner to us, but at the same time, we also realize, the immense competitive threat that they and others represent in the ad market, for instance, right? So there's a whole plethora of players out there that you have to look at.
Okay.
To keep it really short.
The battle for the
Yeah, no, and the good news for Fandango and Fandango Now is we kind of started in the living room. So even though this is a television, as I said 45 minutes ago, that unlike some of the other people that are in the same space, in the TVOD space that we are, they started on laptops or on dedicated devices or other things where, we're the default service on Roku and really those big 55-inch 4K, if not 8K TVs that are in people's living room, that's kind of where we live. And that's a good fit for the Fandango audience that is looking for that premium experience.
And as you kind of said, that battle is kind of won in a sense. You're not expecting a huge increase in the competitive intensity of the TVOD space.
Right, other than competing for, look, our biggest investment would actually probably be historically in tech, but currently for Fandango overall, probably more in marketing and CRM, really just to find those users, convert Fandango customers to Fandango Now or share them. That's become way more important to us.
And Matt, how do you understand the battle for the living room in the 2020s?
I'd actually call it the battle for spend and the attention economy.
Yeah, I think
right? It's about, if you're in the living room, we've mentioned a ton of platforms, of which I have all of them, I think. If I want to go and I want to watch Peaky Blinders, I know where to go. If I want to watch Monday Night Football, I know where to go. And I might even have my laptop open at the same time doing something else. So you're right in saying it's a battle, but I think we're okay in making sure that things are available and that people can find them. I don't think that's a problem. Now it's about where they want to go and what they want to do.
I think we have a few minutes left, so we probably have time for a couple of quick questions. Does anyone have a really difficult, complicated, awkward question that they'd like to ask? The gentleman there. Is there a mic, or should we do you want to shout?
I project well.
You are indeed projecting well.
I understand the SVOD, AVOD. The TVOD model is an interesting one because there's so many TVOD services. How do you find that they differentiate each other? And I just mentioned Hobbs and Shaw. Mm-hmm. Hobbs and Shaw is now available on multiple platforms, mm-hmm. and it's basically at the same price. So, do you find that what differentiates the TVOD services? How do consumers choose one versus the other?
Yep, that is a good question. It's a tough question. Who are you with?
I run AdID.
AdID, great. So I think that was probably going to be one of my concluding comments anyways. I think you have to decide why you're in the business. There's a lot of us, but there's relatively few of us. So you're without naming the competitors, you already know them. Hobbs and Shaw is available on a lot of those services today. And I just mentioned about converting, using our CRM and using our marketing tools to talk about the availability of that content in the home. You really have to decide why you're getting into this business, and that's why I don't see a lot of new people getting into it soon. And I think that even though it's a new release-driven business, I think the content starts bifurcating a little bit. So where iTunes, for example, if there's a music-oriented film, they tend to overperform, and our share suffers a little bit. But for a lot of other content, for some reason, military is very strong for us. I think that's probably because we're being the default service on Roku, we're stronger in middle America, B and C markets, again, in the living room in an established household with a family and a 55-inch TV. So we tend to overperform and over market share on those. So even though, and each company's content offering is slightly different and with a slightly different strategy. The one thing I would say to anyone getting into any of these businesses, whether it's TVOD or SVOD, et cetera, that not only do your market research, but also do your product research. How can you find these customers, have the right UX and product experience for them that allows you to acquire and retain them?
Okay, I think we have time for one more really quick question, if there is one. Otherwise, I'm going to ask one. Sir?
Andrea, linear?
Oh, whether we're going to pursue a linear strategy? No, we've been very clear. Obviously, many of our competitors are very bullish on linear. Our research has clearly found that young viewers, they look at an EPG and they don't really understand what it is. It doesn't make sense to them. They know Netflix as the new user interface, and they want their content on demand. So we're leaning very heavily into the on-demand strategy.
Better make sure they don't know what The Bachelor is. That'll change all of it. When is it on?
Okay, we are pretty much done, ladies and gentlemen. So I've got one final question for the panelists, which is the practical advice question. In the unlikely event that somebody was to come to you and ask you for some advice about how to launch a streaming service, one that was going to make serious sums of money in the 2020s, what would be your most important piece of practical advice you would proffer this budding entrepreneur?
I'm jealous of them. I think candidly, the one area I've been talking a lot about, I think there's still a lot of opportunity in news. Right. I don't think anyone's done news really well yet. So if I were launching a budding service, I would be looking in the news space.
My advice is the same advice I would give for any business or even any individual, in fact, who's looking to advance their career. Find out how you can be a bottleneck. And I mean that in the very best sense of the word, where all the goods and services that flow through a value chain in some way or fashion have to wind up in your lap as they get processed. I know it's a little bit abstract, but it makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay, Cameron, practical advice?
Yeah, know that in advance, know that you know how to find your audience and that you invest in that as well as just investing in tech and everything else that goes along with the business.
And Matt, a final piece of free consulting from you.
Do not underestimate the immediacy and the value of live content, particularly news and sports. You only get to do it once, or no do-overs.
Hear, hear. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that's been in some way useful, valuable, interesting, inspiring, and informative. A massive thank you to our panel.
Thank you, guys.